Okay, I think I've got things figured out here. We'll see if it turns out that way. First of all, I'd like to thank all the people who sent me messages, videos, etc., helping me with this problem. Getting my auto tune done on the little 5 inch and getting the little 5 inch settled down. And first of all, I'd like to say I bought the 5 inch because I had a viewer that had a 5 inch with a problem, and I could not help him with that. So I said, I'll just buy one, build it up, and I'll either go through the same problems or I'll figure it out. And what I've come up with here is back in April when I was building this up, I was just feeling so bad health-wise and in so much pain. I was making mistakes right and left. And actually on April the 5th is when I quit doing videos for quite a period of time, at least 60 days, while me and the doctors tried to figure out what was going on. And I'm not out of the woods on that. I've still got some things I've got to go through, but that's for a future video. And what I've found by loading up my bench flight controller with just a straight up firmware and looking at the 5 inch, I made some bad mistakes back then. Just too much pain. I was in pain and making verbal mistakes on my videos because of the pain. I just finally gave it up around the 1st of April. I didn't do much in May and June. So that was what was going on. And what happened there is going through this initial flight for a quad, going down through this list and doing what it says. Basically, if you pick up the platform and it oscillates a lot, then right here, next section will explain how to remove the oscillations. And if arm the aircraft and stabilize, increase the throttle slowly until the aircraft leaves the ground. If the aircraft starts to oscillate, immediately abort the takeoff and or land. That's because those oscillations can cause flyaways, etc., because the accelerometers and gyros are just overloaded, and the firmware will sometimes try to apply throttle to compensate for that, and it doesn't. So small oscillations near the ground can cause it to shoot up 50 feet and it's still oscillating in the same fashion, so it goes up to 500 feet. All bad problems. And this is, I think, what I did there. If that happens, land. Reduce all the following parameters by 50%. And it's your PIDs on pitch and roll. And I think due to all the pain and stuff I was in then, it looks to me like I did not do this portion correctly. So I'm going to reset everything up and come back to this. I had sort of done this and thought I'd gotten the oscillations out of it and was up to notch filters when I came back to redo those notch filters on this the 1st of July here, after nothing in May and June because my health problems. And I base that on the fact I've got 2 flight controllers up right now. And I can remember back then I did reduce those rates. Here's a flight controller with just the raw firmware on it. And you can see it comes out of the box with PIDs on roll and pitch at 0.135, 0.135, 0.0036 on both of them. Well, during that initial flight, I did see oscillations as soon as I picked it up with these rates in there. And so I started dividing things by 50%. But if we look at my actual flight controller, that's over here on this COM port is where the 5-inch really is. The other one's a bench flight controller, like I say, just with the straight up firmware on it. So if you come in here, and let me put up real quickly a calculator. So if you take this original P for roll and pitch, it was 0.135. And you can see the P here is down to 0.016875. That's because I picked it up back then and had oscillations. So I took the 0.135 and divided it by 2 to cut it by 50%. That gave me a value of 0.0675, which did not solve my problem. So I cut it in half again and made it 0.03375. That did not solve my problem, so I cut it in half again, cutting it by 50% as it says. And so the fourth time I cut it in half, you can see that gave me the 0.016875, which is the value right here in P for roll and pitch. The problem that I created was you're supposed to cut all 3 of these by 50%. Evidently, I was in so much pain and out of it back then, I just did the P term. I didn't do the I term and the D term. This D term was changed the day before yesterday when I did cut it in half again to try to get a little oscillation out of the roll. But you can see the pitch I and D and the roll I are all still at those default values of the firmware. And that comes back to our documentation of if the aircraft starts to oscillate, immediately abort the takeoff and or land the aircraft. Reduce all the following parameters by 50%. PID on roll and pitch. I just did the P terms. That was just a little bit of a brain hiccup because of the pain I was in. I just wasn't doing well. So back in April, I set myself up for failure because I did not change the I and D terms on roll and pitch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to this. I'm actually going to turn off my notch filters again, although they seem to be doing well. I'm going to turn off the notch filters. I'm going to go back to this right here. I'm going to set these back to the default values. I'm going to fly it, and then I'm going to decrease all 3 of them by 50%. And I think when I get my oscillations out of this, that I can bring back the notch filters like I've got them configured and continue with my auto tune, and I'm going to be in Fat City. I hope. I really do think that's what happened, because I do not see, I can see where I did 4 times I reduced the P term on roll and pitch by 50%, but I didn't touch the I and D terms. And I think that's my problem. Also, if you remember right here, we were wondering about this 80. Today I was doing some comparisons of perimeters, and trying to figure most of this out. And when I did a lot of those comparisons, whoops, I've actually saved it away now. Let me see if this one will pop it up. This one may. Yeah. And FFT, no, I've actually corrupted that. I think the notch filters are actually doing a 200 hertz based on what I have seen. Underscore, yep. If you see right here, that hover that I didn't know if it should be set to an 80 has now been reset by the little flights I've done. Remember, this one was up around 180 to 200 when we did the notch filter. You can see those values have been changed. This 80 and this one that was a 40, because it's supposed to be 50%. The FFT is changing these from the defaults, so I do trust that completely. So I will come in here and change my notch filters, reset my perimeters here for PIDs, and we'll go at that again. And this time I will cut all three of the terms by 50% in both pitch and roll, and we will see if that doesn't lead to better results. And I think that was all just brain hiccups, because I was just in too much pain to even be doing this, and I actually stopped on April the 5th when I put up that video, and I think that's where the mistakes were made. But if we look outdoors right now, you can see it's raining. Therefore, those flights will not be done today, likely. I'll have to do those another day. So I'm going to get all that together and make those changes to the perimeters, get everything ready to go again. I think we're going to have much more luck this time. It wasn't real hard to figure out, troubleshoot what was going on after I got down and actually started digging into what was going on, comparing the original PIDs to what I physically had in the platform now. It's a wonder it flew as well as it did fly with those PIDs done the way they are. Just lowering the P term and not touching the I and the D actually lowered it 3 times instead of 4 times, but cut it by 50% 3 times. It did take some of the oscillations out, but I'm just shocked that it did. Not sure I did all the videos on that, because I'd already done all of this in videos on the 7-inch. I just didn't duplicate it on the 5. But it did take oscillations out. I guess I'll do the flights, show you what the original ones are and what I saw and what cutting it by 50% does to it each time. Because just cutting down the P term should have made things worse. That's actually as like you're turning up the D and the I terms without touching P. That's not the way tuning goes. Back in 2014, I learned to do the tuning with a potentiometer on the radio, because I popped up the honey badger after some changes to it, and at altitude hold, it's just sitting there rocking back and forth badly. There's probably a video on my website about that one. Yeah, let's just go look for that one real quick. Honey badger. Try to tell people there's lots of stuff on my website I can't show because I don't want to change the dates on the videos. Honey badger. This is 2014. quick. Because if I go in and change some of these to, some of them were public back then, but some of them are private. And if I go in and I try to change them to public now, this date changes. And there's flights from back then that were out of visual line of sight, above 400 feet. I went up to 1,200 feet at one place one day with the flame wheel. They were all before 2016, so FAA can't do nothing to me about them. But there's lots of them that are private. I wasn't publishing them back then, and you can see I started with the honey badger, it looked like, in 2013. Let's see here. Here we go. Yeah, this was the first flight of the honey badger. After I got the rover doing what I wanted to do, I wanted to duplicate those functions and those autonomous missions with a quad as my next step up towards the autonomous vehicle competition at Spark Fun. Once I got my quad, then I would step up to an airplane. It's part of an old story too. If we look at this here, I'll try to forward it up. It popped up that day. Oh boy, had a piece of balsa, a 1-inch square piece of balsa back then, and I made my own GPS mast with that. Oh God, that's before GPS masts existed. This was the first commercial frame that was ever available. Before this, you had to build everything yourself, period. See what it's doing? So that was back in 2013, did I say? And that's when I went, oh my God, what is going on there? And I quickly learned about PIDs. When was that one again? February 2nd, 2014. How about that? So back then you just set the potentiometer on your radio for an RC channel, and you could make the function of that RC channel changing a term, like the D term on a thing. And that's what the problem was, that D was too high. That's what causes that kind of oscillation. That's one of the things that causes that oscillation. In that case of the honey badger, it was really easy to get it out. Once I had the roll D term on the potentiometer, I just started lowering it until it quit. That's how you tune manually. So I am used to tuning manually. It looks like in this case, poor health bit me in the butt. It was the damn Tron God again. He was a man that day and just really set me up for future failure. It's okay. I whipped his butt today. All right, guys. Thank you.